For those of you who don't know me, my name is Katie McQuaid. My company, Back Pocket Resources, consults with and trains businesses around holistic and productive hiring. We are trying to help end the frustrations that are caused by the use of bad, outdated hiring practices. I know all of us have those horror stories about when it hasn't worked well, which is a shocking amount of the time. And so we're working on teaching strategies to help optimize your business, your improvement, improving the communications around the process and figuring out how you can sustain growth and lead to better opportunities for your company. So my goal today is to share some of the tactics that we've used with a lot of success, things that you can put to use immediately, whether or not you're currently in a hiring mode, but ideas that will help to sort of lay the groundwork, set the foundation for productive growth over time. And we need to be cognizant that a lot of companies are in a period of adjustment after a really sustained period of time where most of the staff was remote or all of the staff was remote. And now there are some people coming back into the office, and what is that going to look like? So if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat. I've scheduled this so that there's going to be some time at the end where we can have some discussions if there is any lingering questions or anything specific to your company. So with that, hopefully the slideshow is moving along with me and encouraging itself to behave. Hey, so reactive hiring, this is the way we've always done it, right? Someone quits, somebody retires, somebody gets promoted, and all of a sudden there is a need, right? If you go to Google, and I strongly encourage you not to take my word for it, actually go do this today. If you type into a Google search, hiring is, the first results that pop up are broken, hiring is bad. The one that'll pop up is the Steve Jobs quote, hiring is the most important thing that any company can do. But then it sort of takes a dark turn and it gets into like, yeah, but we're not doing it right, right? So hiring is the most important thing. In general, it's not being done well. It's a dirty little secret in a lot of companies, and it's really hard to find real statistics on it just because there's so much difference between different companies. But the most solid statistic that I could find was from the Harvard Business Review, and they claim that 40 to 60% of management level hires, so not a kid that you hire to scoop ice cream cones that quits on the second day because they want to go to the beach, management level hires, so people that are being vetted, people that are being reference checked, people that have all the pedigrees and letters behind their names, right? 40 to 60% of management level employees fail within their first 18 months, which blew my mind when I read that. I mean, if there was any other business area that we failed 40 to 60% of the time, we would have burned our companies to the ground, right? There just wouldn't be companies. We can't, could you imagine if your sales pipeline failed? Yeah, I mean, so a lot of this seems to have to do with a misalignment between the company and the employee, or what the role is and what people thought they were getting into. When you talk to people who have voluntarily separated from a company, in other words, they quit, they resigned, gave notice for one reason or another. Sometimes that's to do with a family move or something like that you can't control, having a new baby, retirement. Those are voluntary separations that you can't really control very much. But people who actively go out, find a new job and resign from their current position, most of the time what they'll say is there was a disconnect with the culture, they had weak relationships with their boss or colleagues, or they didn't feel like there was a future for them within that company or within the role that they had. And a lot of that is actually just misaligned expectations, because a lot of times when you speak with the company owners, they'll say, oh yes, we are very invested in our people. We want them to have a career pathway. We want them to have a future with our company and growth and all of that. And then when you talk to the employees themselves, they're like, yeah, I kind of capped out. I don't think I can actually move anywhere here. So I'm looking for a new opportunity where I can grow. Because of all of this friction, because of all of these problems, hiring ends up being a high risk, high cost, and hugely time consuming process. And those are exactly the kinds of things that we avoid, right? As human beings, we don't want to be involved in things that are high risk, high cost, low reward. And that's where we are right now. So as I was saying, reactive hiring, the way it's always been done, we wait until that need is there, right? Somebody quits, somebody retires, somebody moves on, gets promoted, and the position is open for some period of time. And when the position is open for some period of time, the work still needs to be done, right? But the people who are still there end up doing it in addition to their own positions, right? Until the new candidate appears, and whatever the process is to get that person in the door can be pretty time consuming. It gets that a little bit later on, right? So one of the things that we're really advocating for in this presentation and in the work that we do with companies is, how do you create a situation where you're not scrambling, where you're not racing at the last minute when the need already exists and everyone's already getting burnt out? How do you have a pipeline? How do you have a plan so that when there is a need, you already know who the first couple of people are that you're going to call, the first couple of candidates that you want to talk to, the people that are already interested, so that you're not scrambling to cover, right? So what we're talking about is proactive hiring, right? So what we want to do is we want to avoid the pain that's caused by ineffective reactive hiring, right? So the first step in proactive hiring is to be sure that you have some clarity about what's happening in your company in the next 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. And like, I'm not telling you that I expect you to be able to see the future, right? Nobody can see the future. But there are trends, there are benchmarks, there are things that you will know about where your company is headed, right? And when you keep them top of mind, it makes the future a little bit more clear. So I'm talking about like cyclical trends, right? There are busy seasons in a lot of industries, times when there is more work or more work in certain departments. There are annual trends. So for example, if you're in an industry that relies on having a lot of college age workers or interns, right? There are times when they come flooding in, and there are times when they go flooding out, right? And those are things that you can predict, right? In certain industries, there are times of year when there are a lot of conferences or travel that takes a number of people out of the office. This has not been much of a factor for the last year, but it presumably will be again. Perhaps, maybe we stop traveling. But you can also rely on the forecasting that you're doing in sales, what your market segment growth looks like it's going to be, any new products or services that you're planning to release in the next year. Those types of things can lead to growth, right? And in those growth moments, that's when you need to find people. So the next point, and I'm pointing to the slideshow that is all on your screen. The next point is really important, right? If you don't know what you're Cass just dropped in a question. Would you say it's most strategic to hire ahead, during, or after those busy seasons? It's actually the next slide. I'm going to talk about that a little bit more. It to some extent, it depends on what the role is. If it's a role that has a really short lead time, so earlier we used an ice cream shop where you're hiring a bunch of college students to scoop cones, and your training for that role might only be a few days in order to get that person up to speed on what they need to do and how to run point of sale to cash people out, then you might want to do it like right on the cusp of the busy season or even as you're kicking in. If it's someone that's going to need a lot more lead time in order to be effectively working with your systems, with your clients, with your projects, it's going to be a lot easier on the whole system if you do it in anticipation of the busy season so that they are up to speed and able to really help by the time you get into that busy season. Also, it takes time to onboard somebody. And if everybody's already running around with their hair on fire, so like, for example, during the tax filing season in a financial services sort of a role, there's not going to be anyone who has the bandwidth to be able to really sit with that new hire and say, oh yes, this is how our particular systems work. This is how we file these things. These are some quirks in our systems to watch out for. So the risk of a new hire sort of drowning or being in a position where they're not able to really productively help the team increases with the less oversight that they're able to have, if that makes sense. Um, that being said, when does anything go according to plan, right? So there's definitely opportunities where you will just have to scramble someone new. If we're back into that financial services organization, you know, somebody quits or has a medical issue or something comes up right in the heat of the moment, and holy heck, how are we going to get through that? It always feels better to have somebody in place and ready to go before things start flying around, to the extent that that's ever possible. But we will be talking about that a little bit more specifically as the webinar continues, because that comes up a lot. But in terms of the proactive hiring where we are right now, this next point is really important, right? If you don't know what you're looking for, if you can't clearly articulate who the next few people that you need coming into your organization are, what skills they bring, how they align with your culture, what your culture even is, what's important to the organization, you're going to waste time. And this is not like, oh, you might waste time. This is, you will waste time. You will waste your time. You will waste the time of candidates who are applying for a role that is not actually the role that you have, or who are applying to work in an organization that is not actually the way your organization is structured, or the way that you interact culturally. So the tendency, especially when you're when it's a new role, there tends to be a little bit more thought about what specifically it is. But a lot of times you're replacing somebody who's left, who's moved up, who's moved out, who's moved on. And in those moments, there's a tendency to try to replace the person who just left, rather than hire for the position as it is really now and going forward. So what I mean with that is, for example, Jim, who was in this role before, really loves hosting parties. And so he is the person who jumped in, and for years, he's been the person who organizes our annual company picnic, and he's great. He finds these wonderful ideas for games and activities that are these wonderful team building moments, and everyone comes with a smile on their face, and all the families get to know each other. And isn't that just the nicest thing? And now Jim has retired. So how are we going to fill his role as director of finance? Well, we need somebody who knows all the financial software and the regulatory and the filing information, and who's going to organize the family picnic, right? Wrong, right? That's not central to that role. That's central to what Jim brought to your organization. And wouldn't it be nice if you find somebody who wants to take over on that particular piece of culture building and social capital building within the organization? But that's not part of that job, right? The job description shouldn't be developed to replace the person who's leaving. It should be like a hypothesis, a talent proposition, right? If we make this hire, what will this person bring to the organization? What new skills, talents, aptitudes, personality traits are we hoping to bring in, right? So it shouldn't just be a conversation about what the responsibilities of the position are, but also how it fits into the bigger picture of the company, right? Where the company is headed, what values the company has, and how it reflects those values in the lived experience of the employees, not just in the um, handbook or on the website, right? Um, so and once you have that, right, and you know, for example, that Jim is going to be retiring in 6 months, right, then you can start nurturing a pipeline of potential candidates, right? So people who are interested in your company, people who are in your industry, who have the sorts of skills and talents that you have realized that your company is going to need to reach the next level of growth, right? um, they should be people that like your mission and culture. If you're not hiring until Jim retires in 6 months or 5 months, so there's a little overlap, or however that's going to work, you shouldn't be talking to people who are currently in the job market. The only time you should be talking to people who are currently in the job market is if you are currently hiring. And that's because you don't want to create bad feelings, right? If you're talking about what a wonderful opportunity this would be and how we'd love to have you at the company, but you just have to figure out how to feed yourself for the next 6 months until we're ready to hire you. That's not going to leave a candidate with a warm fuzzy feeling about your company. That's not going to say to them like, oh, this is a company that cares about me. They're going to say, I'm going to get a job somewhere else where I can feed myself for the next 6 months, right? And they probably won't be available when you are actually hiring. The people that you should be talking to when you know you're hiring in the future are people that, they're in a role sort of passively looking to see what else is out there. Something about your communication, about your culture has caught their attention. And so you sort of nurture that slowly, right? Through networking events, through social media posts, through direct communication. Heck, go out to lunch, have a coffee sometime, right? We can all do that again. Yay. Um, and then, if you've been talking to them and, Jim says, okay, great, it's 6 months or, 6 weeks and 2 weeks until I retire, then you can say, okay, I know the first 3 people that I'm going to call because I've been talking to them. I'm going to see if they're ready to make a change, right? I'm going to see if this particular role at this time is something of interest to them. So before you have to go through the whole rigmarole of posting the job and seeing who applies and scanning through hundreds of resumes and looking for the ones that actually know the role, people who already have some of the skills that you're looking for, and who may be interested in joining your organization. You also need to prepare your business, right? You need to, if you're bringing someone, so this is like, my mom always said, right? If you're having guests over, you want to clean up first, right? A lot of times we have sort of like ad hoc systems. Things have just developed over the years, right? And especially in smaller companies where people wear many hats and they're responsible for different things, and it may not necessarily be what the plan was, but it's what you stepped into, and here you are now. It is important to have accurate documentation of what the accountability chart looks like, and what your culture and values are, not just, like I said, in the handbook or in a, on your website, but what is the lived experience of that, right? So, for the accountability chart, sometimes, there are, those dashed lines, the less clear lines of reporting, right? And the experience of that is that there may be a bottleneck, right? And it may be you, by the way, if you are the owner or founder of your company, like you may be the point through which all decisions have to flow. And if that's true, you need to know that and recognize it, and let that be part of your communication about what that looks like. Similarly, values, culture, right? At some point, most companies' leadership have sat down and they've made a whole bunch of statements, right? Like they're in their handbook, they're on the website. Those need to be revisited. You need to look back at them and say, like, is this actually what the experience of our employees here actually is, right? and then figure out how to bring the aspirational and the actual back together, right? Um, and doing these exercises, it's good for your company in general. It's good for your current employees. It's good for communications internally. It's great messaging to give to customers as a differentiator. So please definitely focus on these things a little bit, even if you're not looking to hire in the next few months. But preparing your business like this will help you focus on who the stakeholders are, and the personality types, the team that they need to be, the work style that you're looking for, right? And you want to dig in deeper than just the words, right? You want to be able to articulate what that means in terms of how your employees experience these things. So for example, a lot of times in job descriptions, we see phrases like fast-paced environment, right? Or motivated self-starter, right? And to the company, these sound like really positive things, right? Who doesn't want to be in a fast-paced environment? That's interesting. Um, to candidates, that will often sound like, oh, these people are looking for me to do 3 people's jobs for 1 person's salary, right? that's how that comes across. Or everyone's running around with their hair on fire and I'm going to get no training, no support coming into this organization, right? Like those are the feelings that people have when they hear these things. So you want to make sure that what you're saying, you're communicating also what that means, right? There's a big difference between having a culture of excellence where that means we support each other and provide you the tools and time that you need to do your best work, and saying you have a culture of excellence, which means guess what, you're not going to your kid's recital because you're redoing your proposal for the 15th time. So those are things to be very cognizant of when you're communicating about your culture and who you are as a company. So Cass, this is to your point a little bit, the risks of starting too late. There is a feeling a lot of times, again, because hiring someone is a huge expense and it's a huge commitment and it takes so much time and effort to do. A lot of times it gets put off and put off and put off. Oh, well, we don't really need that person yet. Or, oh, we're able to cover this for now and we're going to get there, right? There are some pretty serious risks of starting the process too late, both for like actually saying, all right, we are going to pull the trigger and make the hire now, and also just even prepping yourselves and getting yourselves ready to see what's coming down the pipe. So in organizations all the time, you see where members of the existing team, even if they are amazing, powerful professionals who are getting all the work done, the strain is killing them, right? They are working too many hours. They are feeling under too much pressure. It feels unrelenting. There is not ever a day. Everyone has busy days, busy weeks, busy, like there's, certain times of the month when there's crunches to do with reporting or fulfillment or whatever, your industry is. But if the team is trying to cover too many positions for the number of people that are there, or if you have B and C players who should be replaced with A players, but that's a whole different webinar, you'll have a situation where the existing team is strained too far. So when there's work that needs to get done, it's either going to get done by the existing team members in addition to their own jobs, or it doesn't get done, or it doesn't get done well, right? And that has a risk as well, because you could damage client relationships that took years to build, right? You could make mistakes that cause way more headache and difficulty and expense down the line. So getting a new employee in is not just really like, okay, whew, we got to their first day, they're sitting at their desk, we showed them where the bathroom is, and now they're ready to go, right? There is some time before they're really a productive employee. But as bad as it can be to not have somebody in the role that needs really to be filled, there's what we call the impulse buy hire, right? The impulse buy hire is when you realize that your team is strained, you realize that there's more work than you know how to do. And instead of really slowing yourself down and doing the work to find the person that you really need, you find the first warm body that can do some portion of the work, and you bring them in, and you go like, all right, I'm sure we can train them. I'm sure, oh, they're a nice person. I think they'll fit in well with the team, and heck, we'll just train them. We'll get them what they need. When you hire the wrong, like, we could blow up the chat right now with stories of people who are working in teams where they're with somebody who's not the right person, right? You know, the person that smiles nicely but doesn't get anything done, or worse, the person who shoves the work off on everyone else because they don't know how to do it, or any of a number of miserable coworkers that can happen. It's that sort of like one bad apple can ruin the whole bunch thing. And that's never the person that gets hired during a proactive search, right? If you're looking ahead of the busy season, if you're looking ahead of the crunch time, if you're looking before everybody is so strained that they're like, I don't care, just get another person in this department right now, you will have that wherewithal to say like, I mean, they're 60% of the way there, but let's see if we can get someone who's 80% of the way there or 100% of the way there, right? There's not the temptation to just be like, oh, you come help. So those are some of the benefits of being more proactive in your approach. I do want to talk about, I keep mentioning the cost and the risks involved, right? So when you are conducting a search, we always think of it as, oh, you know, it's going to take some time. And it depends, you know, if you've got a human resources or talent acquisition person in your team, you know, the thought is, well, that's just their job. That's what they're doing, and they're going to find the person. But even in the best case scenario, other people throughout the organization are involved in interviewing. They're involved in having the conversations about it. It's going back and forth, you know, hey, does this job description look right? What is it you're really looking for? All of that. So this slide looks at the best case scenario for hiring a professional employee. And, you know, in this scenario, you post the job, great, applicants apply right away. They're interested and available at the salary range that you offer and looking to work in your company, in your industry, available to start when you need them to, right? So nothing goes off the rails, exactly like business always happens, right? No. These were some more statistics that I thought were really staggering. And it's so hard to think of it this way when you're in the moment of making a hire. But when you sort of pull back and disaggregate, your company will spend somewhere between 20 and 50 hours, direct hours of people's labor over the course of an average of 42 days at an average cost of $4,129 to get a professional hire to their first day, right? This is from SHRM, the Society for Human Resource Management's Human Capital Benchmarking Survey, which they do all the time, and they interview a wide variety of companies over a wide variety of industries across the country. So it's pretty reliable. That's a huge amount of time and money. So in this example, we're looking at 21 hours spent hiring, right? So who's doing that work, right? What's their salary? If you break down their salary by an hourly rate, what is that costing your company? How many rounds of interviews are there, and how many people are in the interviews, right? We often think about it, if you do a panel interview for an hour or 2 hours with a candidate, we think, oh, well, it's 2 hours of labor. But if you've got 3 of your leadership team in that meeting, that's, you know, 3 hours of work time or 6 hours of work time that is not happening because of the interview. Now, obviously, the interview is important, right? Like that has to be a part of the process. But what is coming off of those people's shoulders so that they can take 6 hours out of their week to be a part of that, right? Or out of that team's, shoulders so that they can have that time, right? And again, this is presuming that the person that you interview is the person that checks out and that you are interested in hiring and that they respond positively to your offer and are ready to get started. In so many situations, there's multiple candidates, there are multiple rounds of interviews, and even there, when you get to the sort of 5-yard line, that doesn't necessarily mean they check out on references or background check. They don't necessarily have any interest in accepting the job. So there are so many places where this can be even more time consuming than in this model. But it is just worth thinking about. So now if you've spent all that money, all that time, all that effort, there is a tendency to sort of think about like, okay, we got this person, they're here, they're starting on Tuesday. Here's their desk, here's their laptops, we've got their logins, and we'll show them where the bathroom is, and then whew, we're done. And that is just not the case, right? So a 2017 Gallup survey found that only 12% of employees nationwide think that their company does a good job onboarding. I'm going to guess that many of us on this webinar today are part of the 88% of companies that are not doing it great. And I know I teach this all the time, and it still comes, when we've got a new hire, the tendency is to like, oh, okay, so we've planned for the first day, the first week, and then I'm sure we'll get around to planning what the ongoing training is, how we're integrating them, how we're meeting them with the rest of the team, and all of that stuff. And then life happens, right? So it is the new employee integration and real integration, right? Like the lacing together of the employee and the organization is so important and pays such dividends long terms in terms of productivity, in terms of a feeling of belonging, and therefore of being part of something larger than just themselves, right? They're not just coming in, punching a clock and getting a paycheck. They are part of a team. They are part of an organization that behaves in a certain way, and they're part of that. Those feelings of belonging go a very long way towards employee retention. Again, another webinar, getting ahead of myself. So the point here is that effective hiring does not end on the first day that an employee comes to work, right? You've successfully hired when you have a productive employee who is filling the role that needs to be filled and contributing to the greater organization of the company, right? When they are integrated fully. So a lot of times, like I said, you'll have a plan for the first day, for the first week, right? But orientation is what happens right there. Orientation is not onboarding. Orientation is like, okay, here's the break room and here's the bathroom, and oh, this is how the alarm system works. So when you come in, you can turn it off, right? That's orientation. Onboarding is where you provide the knowledge, the access, the training that somebody needs in order to be an effective employee, to competently do the work that they were hired to do. So even if they know the software or the systems, there are going to be particular quirks of your company. There will be particular quirks of clients, right? How many of you have the client where it's like, oh yeah, but with this particular client, we don't do X, Y, or Z, right? Or they've asked us that we always communicate in thus and such a way. Those are small things, but they are important, and they can only be translated to somebody by somebody who already exists and thrives in the organization, right? So that onboarding, that integration takes time, it takes planning. As a leader within an organization, one of the most important things that you can do is to make sure that somebody is tasked with that. Somebody is actually responsible for onboarding the new employee, and they are given the time and resources to do that successfully. You cannot expect somebody to give up their time with their family or their weekends to onboard somebody right? Because you haven't taken anything else off their plate. You haven't diminished any of their other responsibilities, right? If they're already working their full-time job and their full-time job takes full time, and then you're expecting them to spend an hour or two per day with with a new employee to make sure that person is up to speed. Sure, the logic is like, oh, well, long term, once they get this person up to speed, that will like decrease their workload and give them more time. The way people's brains work is like, okay, I can do this for a little while, but then why am I giving up my nights to do my own job so that I'm getting this person up to speed? They're close enough, right? The other thing is to really make sure that they're making meaningful connection. New hires are making meaningful connections with their colleagues. And this can be a challenge, especially in a hybrid or remote environment that many of us are still operating in. It was a lot easier when it was, okay, you know what, we're gonna have bagel breakfast brought in on Tuesday morning, right, for our meeting, and we can all sit and chat for a little while before. Or, hey, it's Pizza Friday, everyone come to the break room and we'll chit chat over some slices, or we go out on Thursday nights and get, you know, a beer down the street or whatever. I might be hungry, I don't know, I'm only ever talking about food today. So the important thing, though, is that in an in-person environment, there were a lot of opportunities for those casual conversations to happen and those relationships to be built. And those have to be in a hybrid or remote environment, those have to be more planned. Because I don't know about any of you, but I am not willingly jumping on Zoom unless there is a direct return on investment for me at this point in my life. Like, I love you all, but I can't do another face in a box sort of a moment. So they need opportunities to learn about their colleagues, to get to know them, to have casual interactions, and the less casually they'll bump into each other over a water cooler, the more planned it needs to be. To the extent that you say like, hey, employee X, I need you to talk to new employee Y, set up a half-hour meeting, maybe take a walk, or arrange to meet at a coffee shop, or create a Zoom meeting if you're not co-located, right? But we need to make sure that this person feels like they're a part of the team and they know who everyone is and how to get to know them. That I hope makes sense. We'll see. And so we're tying it all together, right? This is how we're creating that productive cycle, right? And that effectively manages and grows your business, right? It's like the lather, rinse, repeat on your shampoo, right? So you've brought new people into the company at some point. Again, it could be next week, it could be next year. Once you bring new people into your company, by definition, they will change the culture, they will change the way that people interact in some small way, right? Hopefully it strengthens it, right? Because you've been thoughtful about who you're bringing in, you've been paying attention to what you needed. So it's strengthened those bonds, it's strengthened those opportunities for your team to collaborate and the relationships that you have with your customers and clients, right? As you continue to grow, as this person becomes a part of your organization, it's very important to go sort of back to the beginning, right? Like figure out your org chart and your accountability and how everyone's interacting with each other, because you threw a new person into the mix, and people are people and they don't operate in predictable ways. They're not just going to fill this one little box, right? You are replacing, what did I say, Jim, who used to plan the parties. Well, maybe the person that you replaced Jim with has some other, profound relationship that they have with a nonprofit, and they've organized the employees to go out and do a service project once a quarter, right? It's not the same, but it's a different way that the culture is being expressed. So you want to keep your eyes on the horizon. You've brought new brains and experiences in. There's going to be an impact. Any new hire that you have could, should, and will affect your company. Right. So your company continues to thrive. Yay. As you're looking towards the future, you want to make sure that you're positioned again to grow again. right? And sometimes that is just capacity building. Sometimes that's just, okay, we've continued to grow. Our new people have come in and they have added to our sales pipeline, or they've helped us develop new products or services that we are offering. And that is, encouraging more business, which means that we need more people. Or sometimes it's, hey, somebody might be thinking about their promotion and their next step in their career ladder. Are we bringing in somebody to backfill that position or to create a new line of work there, right? So it's that continuous improvement model. It's that way that we're continuing to approach the problem. So if anyone has any questions or comments, I'm happy to open that up. But otherwise, Back Pocket Resources exists to help small businesses thrive by producing actionable training, right? Things that you can take with you right now and use today. I'd love to connect with anyone and follow up with these conversations, talk about the specifics of your company where we can help out. And I know that is a lot. I have like a huge note on my wall in front of me always that tells me to go slow, because I don't, and I tend to talk very quickly. But if there is anything that anyone would like to drill down deeper into or talk more about, I'd be very happy to answer any questions right off the bat.